We're very lucky today to have Peter Staley, longtime HIV/AIDS activist and gay and lesbian activist, with us. Very well known for his appearances in the movie How to Survive a Plague. And he's been here in Germany for a couple days already. He's been down in Munich, is here in Berlin, and next we'll be going to Leipzig. And we're just going to have a little discussion today.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be back in Berlin.
I think people who might know Peter Staley's story know that in the late 80s, he had been a closeted bonds trader in New York City, and he was in the closet at the time, and that was during the day, and at nighttime, you were an activist already. So what was it like having this superhero type lifestyle?
It was actually rough, but I found out while I was trading U.S. government bonds at J.P. Morgan, where I started right out of college in '83, I found out I was HIV positive during the darkest years of the crisis in '85, right after Rock Hudson had died, and it was a huge story in America, and the country was in a panic. And I was deeply in the closet, and I stayed pretty closeted about my status as well. And then ACT UP was formed in March of '87. And their first demonstration was on Wall Street. I didn't witness it that day because I was on the trading floor, but I saw their demonstration on the nightly news that night and really felt I had to be a part of it. So I would show up at ACT UP meetings and started, but had to stay in the closet at the same time. So I wasn't going to the big demonstrations. Right. I said, well, what could I do? I could fundraise for the group. So I became head of their fundraising. And so every night I'd show up in my Wall Street suit, and that made me stand out a little in the group. But so, yeah, I led this double life for about a year, and then my immune system really started collapsing, and that kind of forced the decision of which way to go. And I went on disability and became a full-time AIDS activist.
Okay. And you got involved in some pretty public actions, I guess you'd say, in New York. Can you talk about some of those?
Yeah, I mean, after I came out, I came out big time.
Yeah.
I figured I only had a couple years to live. Why not? Go for broke. And there was the ACT UP's first anniversary action was again on Wall Street, and I got arrested, and this was a week after I left my job. And a local TV station thrust its camera in my face and interviewed me while I was sitting in the street, and there I was on TV that night, Peter Staley, AIDS victim. So yeah, I came out, and then I started doing. There was only a handful of ACT UP members, HIV positive ones, because of the horrible stigma in the country. They were willing to go on camera and talk about their own status. And so the few of us who were got used a lot. And so I started becoming kind of a public face of the organization for interviews, and I did Crossfire on CNN with Pat Buchanan, which is shown in the film. So yeah, took off from there.
You know, in Germany, we've been marking all these civil rights anniversaries, and we've been celebrating all these anniversaries from the U.S. Civil Rights Movement. Last year was the anniversary of Martin Luther King's visit to Berlin. In February, we were celebrating the 50th anniversary of Selma. So a lot of nonviolent civil disobedience. And yet we're also looking at what was going on in Ferguson, in Baltimore. With your experience with ACT UP, what's your advice to people in 2015? How can they bring about change and fight injustice, either in America, in Germany, throughout the world?
Well, ACT UP really modeled itself on the civil rights movement as far as its nonviolence credo. We were a nonviolent organization from beginning to end. That isn't to say that some property damage didn't occur from time to time in some of our demonstrations. One instance of that was a demonstration I led where we invaded the headquarters of Burroughs Welcome in North Carolina. And we sealed ourselves into an upstairs office space with high-powered drills, and they had to destroy the office to get us out of there. But we put in our press release right up front saying, "We will pay for any and all damages." This was a very curious thing to see an activist group who is stating up front, yes, some property might be damaged during this action, but we'll make good on it. So we didn't want to be considered violent or that radical, much in the tradition of Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement. But you look at moments like Ferguson today and Baltimore, and you see the reaction of some in the country of, when rioting breaks out, this is disgusting, this is horrible, this is uncalled for. And I take pause at that because you look back at history, and there were some violent moments that we celebrate now. Stonewall is something our own president has mentioned in his speeches as a great moment, a great pivotal moment in my history, the LGBT rights history. And that was a very violent set of nights in New York City. We had the White Night riots in San Francisco, some people aren't aware of. It's another gay moment that was where many police cars were torched after an unfortunate jury verdict in San Francisco having to do with the assassination of Harvey Milk. And the Tea Party, a lot of property damage. Nobody paid for that. Right. And now that's celebrated by the Tea Party. So there are moments where you just had enough, where a community has enough, and you look back on them 20 years later and said the reaction really made a point. And why can't these young, disenfranchised African American communities in our inner cities make a point after decades of being in a stasis that the country ignores? I think, sometimes those reactions finally get a conversation going and finally get attention focused on problems that need solving.
Okay. And I know that you've gone on some of these trips overseas to Ukraine. You're here in Germany now. Germany had such a vibrant gay lifestyle, gay traditions, gay society in the 1920s, up until the coming of the Nazis, really. What's it like being in Germany today, having that history in the background?
Well, the whole country is fascinating. I just was in, as you said, Munich, which is the birthplace of the Nazi Party and the rise of that fascism, and that's where it was at Dachau where the first design for the pink triangle symbol that was put on homosexuals at the concentration camps, ACT UP's symbol was the pink triangle with silence equals death underneath it. So it's all part of a history, and it's amazing to see how vibrant and fully embraced and almost fully equal the LGBT community here is in Germany. They don't have gay marriage yet. They have a few steps more to get to full equality, but they are considered part of the German fabric, certainly by most of German society, and that's a good thing.
All right. And down in Munich, you met with LGBT activists, and you met some university students yesterday here in Berlin. What did you talk to them mostly about? What were their questions?
Well, I'm very fascinated about how Germany has handled AIDS over the years, and in many ways it's done better than most every country in the world. It's got one of the lowest incidence rates in Europe from a population level, and most of its politicians have taken a very public health approach to this. There's been a partnership between government and civil society. The civil society groups, AIDS Hilfe, are continually supported and funded by government grants. This is very different from what we experience in the States, where we still have a government that refuses to do needle exchange programs, and which are a proven method of preventing HIV infections in the IV drug using community. And we don't have that consistent partnership between government and the civil society groups, where there's a funding stream that allows those groups to depend on, look towards the long term. So I'm taking home lessons from Germany rather than bringing lessons here. Although I did give a little push to them to not give up on the, even though their incidence rates is low, they have about 3,000 people becoming infected in the country every year. And they think that's low, and they're proud of it. And I'm like, well, take advantage of that. Get it lower. You know what? You can get it to zero here if you try hard enough. Maybe not zero, but you can get it a lot lower. And that's what we're trying to do in New York State, for instance. I was part of a plan that Governor Cuomo announced to push for that by 2020, to lower our infection rate from about the same number, 3,000 in New York State, down to close to zero. And so, yeah, I'm taking home lessons.
Okay, great. And do you have any opinions on what the U.S. government has been doing overseas to help out with HIV/AIDS issues?
I do. You know, I've been surprised. This is the second trip I've taken with a State Department sponsorship. The first was a little over a year and a half ago in Kiev, where the AIDS problem is really difficult, and so are LGBT rights. And ever since Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's speech, historic speech, Gay Rights Are Human Rights, there's been a real effort by the State Department overseas to expand their civil society programs to include HIV/AIDS and LGBT rights. And that's an extraordinary thing to see. And the fact that, you know, you guys screen the documentary How to Survive a Plague, which in essence is a story about a movement fighting the U.S. government. Right. That you screen that overseas is a testament to how far we've come.
All right, great. And then are we going to see you here for Christopher Street Day in Berlin or any other cities throughout Germany this year or next year?
Maybe next year.
Okay.
I'd love that. Yeah, I'd love that.
Well, Peter Staley, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming to Germany with the U.S. State Department. It was great talking to you.
Thank you.